Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our first royal palace. This is St. James's Palace, and it's official use today, actually. This is the official address of the royal family. So if you ever want to send Lizzie some fan mail, you know where to direct your parcels. Yes, this was actually built, as you kind of tell by the style, it was actually built by Henry VIII. And it was actually built by Henry VIII, but it hasn't actually been lived in by royals for a while. The Queen obviously lives in the palace at the current moment. Prince Charles lives in Clarence House. But we do use this building for example, receiving foreign ambassadors, giving them their accreditation, so on and so forth. Now, Henry VIII, of course, is a man that we kind of have to talk about. What's Henry VIII most famous for?
The Anglican Church.
The Anglican Church. We'll get to that in a bit. What else is he famous for?
Womanizing.
Womanizing. Well done. How many wives did he have?
8, 7, 9,
You missed a number.
10.
No.
6.
6. Henry VIII had 6 wives. Now, everyone's impression of Henry VIII, thanks to the kind of portraits that we have, is that we think of him as being a bit obese, we think of him as holding a walking stick. The truth is, when he married his first wife, he was actually really young, he was dashing, he was played by Jonathan Rhys-Meyers in a production of The Tudors. And so you can kind of get an idea of how attractive he was when he was really young. Interestingly enough, if there are any Game of Thrones fans here, his first wife wasn't actually originally meant to marry Henry. She was originally meant to marry his brother, Arthur. And we would have had a King Arthur if it wasn't for the fact that he died at the age of 15. And so the woman who was meant to marry him, Catherine of Aragon, ended up marrying Henry VIII. Now, Catherine of Aragon and Henry VIII tried to have children. Henry VIII really wanted a son to ensure that the kingship would stay within the Tudor family, but unfortunately, they didn't manage to get a son, and they had a daughter, Mary, who at one point in her life was Queen of England for a while. Now, Henry VIII really wanted a son, wasn't too happy with Catherine of Aragon, and so he tried to get a divorce. But the Pope said, no, you will not get a divorce. Henry VIII decided, if the head of the church isn't going to give me a divorce, I'm going to make myself head of the church so I can give myself a divorce. And that's exactly what he did. He broke away from Rome. He decided that all the Catholic monasteries and nunneries in this country would be disassembled. And that's what he did, Dissolution of the Monasteries Act. Now, he got his way, and within a few days of divorcing Catherine of Aragon, he was in Anne Boleyn's bed. They got married. She was raised in France, was of French persuasion, dressed in the French fashion, was very fashionable, very attractive. Unfortunately, he still didn't get the son that he wanted. And they had a daughter, Elizabeth, who later in her life, became Queen of England. So we've got a bit of a pattern. Both of Henry's first daughters ended up being queen at some point in their lives. So I guess there's a bit of swings and roundabouts for you. Now, unfortunately, Anne Boleyn, being quite attractive, also attracted rumours of being an adulteress. Unfortunately for Anne Boleyn, she was born with a 6th finger, and so people thought she was a bit of a witch as well. Now, among all of these rumours, they ended up charging her with adultery, which, considering that she was queen, was also treason against the king. And so she was sentenced to death. Now, because she was of high birth, she was sentenced to beheading by the sword. And after her death, it wasn't 2 days before Henry VIII decided, right, that's it, I'm going to take my next wife. And so he ran into the arms of Jane Seymour. Now, Jane Seymour, we think, was Henry VIII's most beloved wife, because she was the one who managed to give him a son. So that's a bit of British history for you. Now, Jane Seymour's son, Edward VII, actually died at a really young age. So I guess, he didn't really ended up getting the king that he wanted in the end. And unfortunately for Jane Seymour, she also died in childbirth. Henry VIII was really sad. She grieved for a period of 3 years, and after 3 years, he decided to marry again. Now, back in those days, you didn't have things like OkCupid, you didn't have things like Tinder, so instead of looking up photos, what Henry VIII did was he commissioned people to paint pictures of eligible bachelorettes in the country. And he saw a picture of Anna of Cleves, who was German. And he thought, not too shabby, this will be fine, this will do well in my bed. Unfortunately, the first time that he saw her was on the wedding day, and let's just say he wasn't very satisfied, and he wanted his goods returned. Now, thankfully for him, Anne of Cleves didn't find him too attractive either. They didn't consummate their marriage, and they managed to get it annulled. Now the next wife, well actually, talking about Anne of Cleves, she actually got off quite well among all of the wives, considering that because they managed to kind of be friends after that, she was actually given a very decent allowance. She was given a house in the countryside, and she basically outlived everyone else who ended up being married to Henry VIII. So she got off quite well actually. Now the next wife, the fifth wife, Catherine Howard, was really young, really attractive. Unfortunately, by this point in Henry VIII's life, he wasn't attractive. He had a bout of syphilis, he had a gangrenous leg that he wounded in a battle, so he was always limping, he was chronically obese, so he wasn't exactly the most attractive person in town. And Catherine Howard apparently thought so as well. And she ended up having a lot of trysts and affairs with other young courtly gentlemen of the period. And in the end, she was caught for adultery and she was beheaded as well. Which brings us to the sixth wife, Catherine Parr. Now the very creepy thing about Catherine Parr, her name was Catherine because her mother had actually decided to name her after Henry VIII's first wife. So I guess we've kind of come full circle. Now Catherine Parr was actually a very wise woman. She actually brought Elizabeth and Mary, who had been estranged from their father, back into the palace. She took really good care of them, she raised them in her own household, and she actually outlived Henry VIII. So she was pretty much the lucky wife. And I've actually told you a lot about these six wives, and you might be a bit confused, you might not remember what happened to the first one. So here's a bit of a helping guide, if you will. It's a very simple rhyme that school children still learn in England today. It goes like this. Divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. Shall we say it together? Let's go. Divorced,
beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived.
Very good. Now, if you like stories about beheadings and people dying, we do offer a Grim Reaper tour, which is going to be quite cool because it happens in the evening. You get to go around London and learn about the plague, learn about deaths, learn about disease, learn about executions, all the exciting, gritty stuff that you need to know about London. So if you're interested in that, do let me know at the end of the tour and you can find out more about that at the pub. Now, you've seen your first royal palace, so now let's go on and see your second.